And we can take pieces off of here. Get rid of the beef this time. Everything adjusts. We'll get rid of toppings altogether. Make this a normal pizza. We see your pizza is extra large and extra sauce. Perfect. And of course, at any point we put -- help, we get our help text. Welcome back to Understanding Python. My name is Jake, and today I'll be teaching you how to manually process command line arguments in a script. Adding command line arguments to your scripts allows you to modify runtime behavior based on user input. This is a crucial concept for any Python developer that wants to write command line tools. As we go, if you learned something new, let me know by liking the video. Now let's get started. In order to manually process command line input in Python, we're going to use the built-in module sys. To do that, we'll just import sys. And the attribute that sys exposes is sys.argv. This will be a list of all the arguments that were passed into your script. In order to see what this looks like, we're simply just going to print sys.argv. Now if we were to run our current script, which is called pizza builder in the current directory, a little bit of foreshadowing on what it's going to do, and pass some arguments behind it, we can see what that looks like. So we'll say python pizzabuilder.py, telling Python that we should be running this file, and by arguments it's basically anything that comes after this point. That could be the word test. You can throw in a -a, the word another, 15, -- something, basically anything you want. And when we hit enter, we'll see that sys.argv is a list of each of those items that we passed in, as well as the script itself. So Python conveniently breaks each of these arguments into its own element in a list under sys.argv. Now, while I could just say, take the items in this list and do something with it, that's not a very exciting tutorial. So let's actually build out a fairly decent basic CLI with a little bit of functionality. As you saw from the name of the file, this is called Pizza Builder. So let's build a little script that allows people to pass in a pizza order via the command line, processes the input, and then gives back some kind of information about the order that went through. Now, since we know we want this to run as a script, one helpful thing we can do is bring that over and say if $name equal to $main. And this brings us way back to the very first video in this series. If you've skipped ahead to this point or didn't see that portion of the original video, then there will be a link in the top right now. You can go ahead and check that out as I get more in depth about what exactly this check does. Just know for now that anything that is under this if statement will only run if this file is ran as a script. Okay, so the first thing that we probably want to do is allow people to get some type of help text. So we'll check if help in sys.argv, or a good alternative is -h that we should allow in sys.argv. Then we'll run a function called print help, which we'll define right now. So what print help should do is give some good information back to the user about what exactly the script is, and more importantly, how to use it. Specifically, what kind of arguments it accepts and what kind of options it accepts. So I'll go ahead and write that out now and bring you back when I'm done. Okay, we now have our help text written out. It says a simple message at the beginning: welcome to the pizza builder, let's build a pizza. It then gives us a usage example saying pizzabuilder.py, followed by any arguments, and then that followed by any options. The order of this is going to be important later on. For our arguments, we have size and crust. The options that we make available for size are small, medium, large, and extra large, and crust will be normal, thin, and deep dish. For our options, we're going to allow people to pass in one or more toppings that they want on their pizza via -- toppings, as well as being able to specify extra cheese and extra sauce. Now, extra cheese and extra sauce are interesting because we're going to process these as what's known as flags. So you don't actually put in a value for these. Just saying -- extra cheese makes the value true. So you're saying, yes, I want extra cheese. Same thing for extra sauce. If these aren't passed in, then the value for those we'll assume is false. And of course, down at the bottom, we're saying -h and --help prints the help text and exits. Okay, so if we save this, run it with the current behavior, we don't have -h or --help, we should see exactly as expected. It's going to print out the sys.argv. Now if we run it again and pass --help, we'll see, give ourselves some more room, a nicely formatted help text. Beautiful. And the same is true for -h as well. Same help text. This makes it nice so that way if someone is trying to run this for the first time, they can just pass in --help and get an idea of what exactly our script is doing and how they can use it. This way they don't have to read through the code itself and they can just get straight to using the tool. Having really good help text is super important for having a well put together CLI tool. Okay, at this point you may be asking why I put an F here. Well, this is what's known as an F string in newer versions of Python. That's because I want to make our script a bit more flexible when it comes to the available choices for size and crust. Also, since I know we're going to be validating these choices later on, we can just have them populated automatically given a data structure that we already defined, say something globally. So if we make a new global variable up here called sizes, this will be a dictionary, and we're going to map the value s to small, and do the same thing with the other sizes. Okay, now we have a dictionary of available sizes, and I've even included an additional size, extra large. The great thing about this is once we use this to populate the available sizes in our help text, we can just modify the size dictionary and everything else in the script will adjust accordingly. We don't have to update this in multiple places. And the way that we're going to inject this in here is by simply doing a join inside of our multi-line string here. So we'll join on a comma and a space, and the iterable we're going to use is sizes.keys. And now we'll just do the same thing for crusts. Okay, now we have also adjusted that for crust as well. So I've saved it. Let's run this with help one more time. And we see we have the exact same output. The difference being that now we have a new size for crust. And I've also made these lowercase because it's a bit easier to type. Okay, now we're ready to start processing the input that we're given. So let's define a new function called process input. And this should take in an argument list. So we'll call that args list. This is just going to be sys.argv. So we know that's going to be a list of strings. Now, if you remember the structure of sys.argv, just pass in something like 1, 2, 3, 4. We see that the very first thing that we're given is the name of the file itself. We don't really need that, so we can just go ahead and pop that out. We'll pop 0. Now args list is just going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. Now what I want to do to process this input is take this list and convert it into a dictionary that represents an order. So we'll call that dictionary order dict. And there's a few things that I definitely know that I'm going to want to need is size. Leave that blank for now. We'll want to get the crust as well. And we'll immediately want to just say toppings is equal to an empty list because we'll want to process that later. Now to get the size, that's going to be the very next argument, which is currently at index 0 because we popped out the first one. And to get the size, we can do the exact same thing. So we'll pop that out, which means that the value of the size is put into the dictionary and the args list is reduced by one value, which means we can do the exact same thing for crust as well. So popping 0 here gives us the size. Next we pop 0 again to give us the crust. We'll deal with toppings later. The next thing that we're going to check is to see if extra cheese is in the list. So if extra cheese is in args list, then what we'll do is say order dict extra cheese equal to true, and then remove that value from args list. Dot remove extra cheese. So we're seeing if extra cheese is in the list. If so, we're going to set the key extra cheese in order dict to true. And then we're also going to remove that from the list. So as we're going along and processing the input, we're constantly removing items from that arguments list that was passed in. And we can do the exact same thing for sauce, because that is also a flag. Immediately we can just select cheese and change that to sauce. Okay, so at this point, assuming all the values passed in are valid, we've removed the size, we've removed the crust, we've removed extra cheese and extra sauce. That just leaves toppings. So now we can see if someone passed in toppings. If toppings is in args list, then we're going to reverse the order of the pass to just a little bit. We'll say args list dot remove dash dash toppings, and then set order dict toppings equal to args list. We can do this because at this point we've removed everything else from the arguments, meaning that if the user is using this correctly, the only things that we should have left are a list of toppings. So let's try this out. We'll keep this print statement here for now. And now say processed order is equal to process input. We're going to pass in sys.argv. So at this point, assuming everything went well, we should have a dictionary back. Let's print out that dictionary. Processed order. And let's build ourselves a pizza. So we'll give it a size large. Crust is going to be, say, normal. We'll pass in some toppings, bacon, and onion. Notice how we're just separating each of those elements under toppings by a space. Doesn't need to do commas or anything like that. And then we're also going to pass in extra cheese. We'll run it and see what happens. Ah, I see the issue. I should have put 2 dashes here, as well as 2 dashes here, because they're exact string matches. And before we try that again, it would also help if we returned order dict. Okay, we'll save it and try it again. Okay, so we initially see the arguments that were passed in, and now we can see the dictionary that was created from that. Size, large, crust, normal. The toppings are bacon and onion. This is again a list of strings, and extra cheese is set to true. We don't have a value for extra sauce, so we know that that's going to be false. Okay, at this point, we know that the happy path of this works, but if a user to pass in something unexpected, like putting in dash dash bad, then we get some unexpected results, namely a new topping in here called dash dash bad. So let's do a little bit of input validation. This is going to be pretty basic, as proper input validation for all possible conditions is fairly lengthy, but we can get some pretty good validation fairly simply. We'll call this validate input, take in processed. That will be that process dictionary. Initially set this valid equal to true. So we're only going to invalidate it if we find an issue. Now the first validation we're going to do is make sure that the size that we get is one of the values that is expected based on the dictionary that we defined before. So since we had a little bit of forethought, we can just say if size not in sizes dot keys, then we're going to print out a little helpful statement here saying invalid crust choice, and then tell them the choice that they made. Of course, adjust the string types, and then set valid equal to false. We're going to do the same thing for our crust, which I just realized that we put crust up there. Change this size up for crust. We can keep crust the same here. Change this out for crust as well, and then swap that out for crust. Okay, and then the only other thing we want to validate is our toppings. So we'll iterate for each of those. So for topping in processed toppings, we could either maintain a toppings list, but we'll let people be a little bit crazy and only check to make sure they're not trying to pass in any additional arguments by putting like dash something or dash dash something. We'll simply check if topping dot starts with, and that'll be just a dash, which will cover the case of having dash something or dash dash something. Then we'll print out another f string saying invalid topping choice, and then passing in the topping there as well. Finally, setting valid equal to false. Now at the end of this, we're going to check if not valid. So if any of the validations failed, then we're going to print help again. Run that print help function, which, if you remember, that does a sys exit. So we're not going to run the rest of the script. Okay, now under the line where we process the order, we're going to validate the input, which we're going to pass in processed order. So we should only get a printed out good processed order if the values that we passed in were fine. So let's save that and give ourselves a little bit more room and try that previous bad example. Perfect. We get invalid topping choice. Looks like I forgot the E. Sorry, it's a bit late. And then we get our help text, and the script exits perfectly fine. So now that the user knows that they shouldn't be passing in dash dash bad for a topping, then they'll hopefully remove that and run the script as normal. And we now have our processed result. So before we move on to the actual function of, quote, building our pizza, there's one last simple validation we could add in right here, which will be or length of sys.argv is less than 3. The reason why we're saying 3 is because we know we're going to have pizza builder. We should definitely have our size, and we should have our type of crust at the bare minimum for a pizza. If we don't have those entries in our sys.argv list, then we need to print help. Let's save that, and we're going to get rid of a bunch of these things. We're just going to pass in L. Perfect. It prints out our help text. At the very least, if someone just runs python pizza builder.py, even without -h or -help, it's going to give them that help text. All right. Finally, the very last thing that we need is to actually write our function to build the pizza, which we'll take in order, which will be that processed order. A lot of this function is going to be pretty basic since it's basically just string manipulation, but I'll show you the very first line, kind of explain it because it builds on top of why we made these dictionaries up here, as well as the values to go with each of these keys. So we'll start off with a basic string called pizza. So this is the one we're going to be building everything on top of. This is going to, of course, be an f string. We say sizes order. Then we're going to get the value of the size that was passed in. And then we're going to do the same thing for crusts. Okay, so how this is going to read is it's going to substitute the value, say, L for large, and then if we pass in thin, it's going to substitute that for thin crust. We'll put a space in here just to keep it nice and neat. Now, the reason I didn't put a value in for normal is because it kind of reads a bit weird to say normal pizza. Like, you probably wouldn't order pizza saying, I'd like a large normal pizza with these toppings, whereas you would say, I'd like a large thin crust or a large deep dish. Otherwise, you're just going to say, I'd like a large pizza with these toppings. Okay, I'm going to write out the rest of this and bring you back in when I'm done. Okay, our pizza building function is done. We're basically checking to see if toppings were wanted. If so, we're going to say with and then a list of the toppings. If they passed in extra cheese, we're going to say plus extra cheese. And if they passed in extra sauce, we're going to say and extra sauce. So now, at the very bottom here, we're going to say pizza is equal to build pizza with the processed order, and then print out your pizza is the pizza. And of course, because it's a pizza, we'll throw in 2 exclamation points. Okay, and since this is the first trial run, we're going to keep in those prints for sys.argv as well as processed order, just so we can see how things move along. So the order I'm going to put in today is going to be, say, an extra large, deep. Toppings will be bacon, onion, and beef. It's going to be a Bob pizza. We're also going to throw in some extra cheese. And since it's a deep dish, we'll also throw in some extra sauce. Okay, so we see all of the arguments that were passed in. We see everything processed. Bacon, onion, beef as the toppings. Extra cheese, true. Extra sauce, true. And the resulting output is your pizza is extra large deep dish with bacon, onion, beef, plus extra cheese and extra sauce. Let's go ahead and comment out these print statements just so we can see what it would actually look like in a true script form. Same arguments, beautiful output. And we can take pieces off of here, get rid of the beef this time. Everything adjusts. We'll get rid of toppings altogether. Make this a normal pizza. We see your pizza is extra large and extra sauce. Perfect. And of course, if at any point we put -- help, we get our help text. All right. And now we've just written the script with some pretty nice help text, some basic validation, and it processes all the input that the user gives in and then modifies the behavior thereon. A lot of manual processing like this is going to be up to creativity. You can either allow your users to pass in a bunch of different types of input, or you can really constrain it to just a few different things. Kind of like what we did with this video. Now, there are better ways to process input in Python. There's the built-in library argparse, as well as plenty of third-party libraries, my favorite being Click, both of which we'll be covering in future videos. However, I think it's important that you got this good basis of how exactly argument parsing can be done manually under the hood. And that wraps up this video. Now that you understand how to manually process command line arguments, we can build upon this concept later with argparse and Click. What is your favorite trick with manually processing command line arguments? Or was this something I showed today? Leave a comment down below to let me know. As always, today's code will be added to the Understanding GitHub repo, so check the description for a link. And of course, if you have any questions or suggestions for topics you'd like me to cover, leave a comment for me. To keep up with the series, please consider subscribing. Thanks for watching.